The twin suns of Pyraxis blazed overhead as young dragons filled the skies above the Dragon Academy. Their roars echoed across mountains while flames painted the air with brilliant colors. Every young dragon practiced for the most important moment of their lives, the trial of flames. Every dragon, except one. Ember crouched behind a boulder near the training grounds, watching her siblings soar through elaborate aerial maneuvers. Her copper scales, pale compared to the bold reds and golds of other dragons, seemed to catch the light wrong. While her clutchmates breathed fire hot enough to melt stone, Ember could only produce small wisps of flame that barely warmed the air. "Again, Cinder," their instructor bellowed at Ember's sister. "Higher, faster. A dragon who hesitates is a dragon who fails." Cinder responded with a magnificent dive, her crimson scales flashing like rubies. She pulled up at the last second and released a column of fire that scorched the practice targets below. The other students roared their approval. Ember shrank further behind her hiding spot. She had tried the same maneuver yesterday. Her wings had tangled mid-dive, and she had barely managed a clumsy landing. The laughter of her peers still burned in her memory worse than any flame. "Pathetic." A harsh voice spoke behind her. Ember turned to find Scorchwing, the largest dragon in their age group. His scales gleamed like freshly spilled blood, and smoke curled constantly from his nostrils. 3 of his friends flanked him, all massive and confident. "Hiding again, little copper?" Scorchwing sneered. "The trial of flames is only weeks away. What will you do when you must dive from the sky cliffs? Cry and beg for mercy? I am practicing in my own way," Ember said quietly, hating how small her voice sounded. "Your own way?" One of Scorchwing's friends laughed. "There is only the dragon way. Strong wings, hot fire, fearless hearts. You have none of these things." They walked away, their mocking laughter trailing behind them. Ember waited until they were gone before allowing tears to fall. She wiped them away quickly. Ashamed even of this weakness, she could not help being small. She could not help that her flames were weak. She could not help being terrified of heights, even though dragons were meant to rule the skies. But she could hide her tears. That much control she still possessed. The next morning, unusual activity stirred through the academy. Human visitors had arrived as part of a cultural exchange program. Ember had studied humans in her lessons, fascinated by creatures who had reached the stars despite having no wings, no fire, no natural weapons at all. She watched from the library windows as the delegation toured the grounds. Most humans seemed nervous around the massive dragons, staying close together in their group. But one man, wearing simple clothing and carrying only a small bag, walked with calm curiosity. He stopped to examine dragon architecture, asked questions about their customs, and smiled warmly at students who approached him. The academy's headmaster introduced him as Ambassador Marcus Chen, a human teacher who would spend several weeks studying dragon education methods. "Teaching?" Scorchwing muttered to his friends, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What can a tiny creature without claws or fire possibly teach us?" But Ember noticed something others missed. When Marcus demonstrated human mathematics to a curious student, his patience never wavered, even when the dragon struggled. When a young dragon knocked over his water container by accident, Marcus simply laughed and helped clean it up. When asked why humans explored dangerous space, he spoke not of conquest but of curiosity and wonder. Over the following days, Ember observed Marcus from a distance. She watched him work with struggling students, never raising his voice or showing frustration. She noticed he carried a small notebook and wrote constantly, recording observations with careful attention. One afternoon, she witnessed something remarkable. A dragon student named Frost was attempting advanced calculus, growing increasingly upset with each mistake. The traditional dragon instructor had already scolded him twice for errors. Marcus approached quietly. "May I show you how humans solve this?" he asked. He broke the complex problem into smaller steps, explaining each piece with patience. When Frost made mistakes, Marcus simply said, "That is part of learning. Try again." Within an hour, Frost solved the problem, his confidence visibly growing. Ember felt something shift inside her chest. This human, so small and fragile compared to dragons, possessed a strength she had never considered, not physical strength, but something gentler and perhaps more powerful. That evening, she found herself walking toward the garden where Marcus often sat after classes, studying dragon culture. Her heart pounded with each step. Every instinct told her to turn back, to hide, to remain invisible. But she thought of Frost's growing confidence. She thought of Marcus's patience. She thought of the trial of flames approaching like an inevitable storm. Marcus looked up from his notebook as she approached. His expression held no judgment, only kind curiosity. "Ambassador Chen," Ember began, her voice barely above a whisper. "May I ask you something?" "Of course," Marcus said, setting aside his work. "Please, call me Marcus. And you are Ember?" "Yes? I have seen you in the library." She had not realized he noticed her. "Yes. I have been watching how you teach, how you help students who struggle." "Learning takes many forms," Marcus said gently. "Everyone has their own path." Ember's throat tightened. The question she needed to ask felt too vulnerable, too revealing. But she had come this far. Small braveries, she thought, though she did not yet know where those words came from. "How do humans become brave?" she asked, the words tumbling out in a rush. "You are so small and fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no fire, yet you travel between stars, explore unknown worlds, face dangers that would terrify creatures much stronger. Please, I need to understand. How do you find such courage when you are born so weak?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her with thoughtful eyes. Then he smiled, a warm expression that somehow made Ember feel less alone. He knelt down to her level, bringing his eyes even with hers. "Little one," he said softly, "I think you have already shown more bravery today than you realize. Asking for help, admitting struggle, seeking to learn from others, these things require tremendous courage." Ember blinked, confused. "But I am afraid of everything. The trial, the heights, the judgment of others. How can that be brave?" "Because," Marcus replied, "true bravery is not the absence of fear. It is doing what matters despite being afraid. And coming here tonight, asking me this question, that took real courage, Ember. You just do not recognize it yet." Something in his words resonated deep within her, like a note struck on an instrument she had never heard before. Could it be true? Could fear and bravery exist together in the same heart? "Will you teach me?" Ember asked, her voice trembling with hope and terror. "Will you show me how humans find courage?" Marcus's smile widened. "I would be honored, but I think what I will actually show you is the courage you already possess. You simply need to learn to see it." As the twin suns set over Pyraxis, casting the garden in warm twilight, a small copper dragon and a fragile human began an unlikely friendship. Neither knew yet how this moment would change not just Ember's life, but the ancient traditions of an entire world. But they both understood, in their own ways, that something important had just begun. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Dragon Academy's courtyard as Marcus Chen waited beside the fountain. He had asked Ember to meet him here, away from the crowded training grounds where her siblings practiced their fierce aerial maneuvers. Ember arrived early, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Her copper scales caught the light differently than the bold reds and golds of other young dragons. She had always thought they looked washed out, weak, another reminder of how she did not fit. "Good morning, Ember," Marcus said warmly, sitting on the fountain's edge. "Thank you for trusting me." The small dragon settled onto her haunches, tail curling around her feet. "The other students think I am foolish for asking a human about bravery. Dragons are supposed to be naturally fearless." Marcus smiled gently. "May I tell you a secret? Humans are actually quite afraid most of the time." Ember's eyes widened. "But you travel between stars. You explore unknown worlds. How can you do such things while being afraid?" "That's exactly what bravery is," Marcus explained. "Doing important things even when fear tells you to stop. Let me show you something." He stood and walked toward a nearby observation tower. It rose only 20 meters high, barely worth noticing for dragons who routinely soared thousands of meters above the ground. Yet Marcus's steps slowed as he approached the stairs. "I am afraid of heights," he admitted quietly. Ember tilted her head in confusion. "But you arrived here by spacecraft. You flew through the void of space. Inside a ship with walls and floors, yes. But open heights?" Marcus looked up at the tower, and Ember noticed his hands trembling slightly. "They terrify me." "Watch." He began climbing the stairs. Ember followed, her claws clicking on the metal steps. She watched as the human gripped the railing tighter with each level. His breathing became careful and measured. By the time they reached the top platform, small beads of sweat dotted his forehead. "You are truly afraid," Ember said with wonder. "But you climbed anyway." "This is my practice," Marcus explained, his voice slightly unsteady as he looked out over the academy. "Every morning I come here, I climb these stairs, I face this fear, not to make it disappear, but to prove to myself that fear does not control me." Ember stepped beside him, looking down at the courtyard below. For her, this height meant nothing. She could leap from here and glide easily to the ground. Yet watching Marcus struggle with something so simple to her shifted something in her understanding. "The trial of flames," she said quietly. "I must dive from the sky cliffs in 12 days. The drop is 1,000 meters. All young dragons must do this, to prove their worth." "And you are afraid," Marcus stated simply. Ember's throat tightened. "I am terrified. I have nightmares about falling, about my wings failing, about everyone watching me fail. Sometimes I wish I had been born something else. Anything else. A creature without wings who would never be expected to make such a dive." Her voice cracked on the last words. She had never spoken this truth aloud before. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then knelt beside her. "Ember, do you know what I hear when you tell me this?" She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "I hear tremendous courage," he said. "You just admitted your deepest fear to someone you barely know. That takes remarkable bravery." "That is not bravery," Ember protested. "Bravery is diving fearlessly from cliffs. Bravery is breathing fire that melts stone. Bravery is continuing forward when every part of you wants to run away," Marcus interrupted gently. "Bravery is asking for help when pride tells you to hide. Bravery is being honest about your struggles." "Honest." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tablet. "Let me show you some human stories." Over the next hour, Marcus shared records of human history. He showed Ember firefighters who ran into burning buildings despite their fear. Teachers who worked in dangerous areas because children needed education. Doctors who treated deadly diseases knowing they might become infected. Explorers who ventured into unknown territories despite not knowing if they would return. "Notice something," Marcus said. "In every interview, every recording, these brave humans admit their fear. They talk about being scared, about wanting to quit, about the nights they could not sleep from worry. Their bravery did not come from having no fear. It came from acting despite fear." Ember studied the images carefully. She saw humans with trembling hands performing delicate surgeries. She saw rescue workers with tears on their faces carrying others to safety. She saw scientists double-checking their equipment before dangerous experiments, their nervous habits visible. "They are all afraid," she whispered. "Yes," Marcus agreed, "and they are all brave. These two truths exist together." "But how do I become like them?" Ember asked. "The trial is only 12 days away. I cannot change who I am in such short time." Marcus smiled. "We do not try to change who you are. We practice small braveries, little acts of courage, done every day, that build your confidence, like muscles build, with exercise." He pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down. "Here is your first challenge. Today, you will speak up once in class. Just once. Raise your claw, share an answer, let others hear your voice." Ember's scales prickled with anxiety. That seems impossible. More impossible than diving from the sky cliffs? Marcus asked. She considered this. No, less impossible. Much less. Exactly. We start with less impossible things. Tomorrow, you will fly 10 meters higher than you flew today. The next day, you will introduce yourself to one new dragon. Small braveries. Ember. One at a time. And these small things will prepare me for the trial? Marcus looked at her seriously. These small things will teach you that you are already brave. You simply have not recognized it yet. As they descended the tower together, Ember felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not confidence. Not yet. But perhaps the smallest seed of hope. Behind them, hidden in the shadows of the training ground, Scorchwing watched with narrowed eyes. The large crimson dragon had heard everything. The Dragon Academy's main hall buzzed with the sounds of young dragons debating stellar navigation. Ember sat in her usual spot at the back, making herself as small as possible. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she remembered Marcus's challenge. Speak up once. Just once. The instructor, a stern emerald dragon named Professor Skyfire, posed a question to the class. Who can explain why human vessels use curved trajectories through space instead of straight paths? Several claws shot into the air immediately. Scorchwing bellowed out an answer without waiting to be called. Because humans are weak and must save their fuel. Professor Skyfire frowned. Partially correct, but incomplete. Ember knew the real answer. She had studied human space travel extensively over the past few days. Her claw trembled as she slowly, carefully raised it. The professor's eyes widened slightly. Yes, Ember? Do you have something to add? Every head in the classroom turned toward her. Ember felt her throat tighten. She could lower her claw, shake her head, retreat into silence. That would be easy. Safe. But Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Small braveries. Humans use curved paths because they use gravity assists, Ember said. Her voice quiet but steady. They turn the gravity of planets and stars into free acceleration. It is not weakness. It is cleverness. They work with the universe instead of fighting against it. Silence filled the room. Then Professor Skyfire nodded slowly. That is exactly correct. Well explained, Ember. A few students murmured approval. Others looked surprised that the quiet dragon in the back had spoken. But Scorchwing's expression darkened with displeasure. After class, as Ember gathered her study materials, Scorchwing blocked her path. 3 of his friends flanked him, all larger dragons with bright, bold scales. So the little copper scale thinks she is smart now, Scorchwing sneered. Learning human tricks from your pet human teacher. Ember's first instinct was to lower her head and flee. But something had shifted inside her during that moment in class. She had spoken despite her fear. She had been heard. She had been right. She lifted her gaze to meet Scorchwing's eyes. Ambassador Marcus is not my pet. He is my teacher. And yes, I am learning from him. You should be learning proper dragon ways, one of Scorchwing's friends hissed. Not the weak methods of creatures who cannot even breathe fire. Humans reach the stars without wings or fire, Ember said quietly. They built what they needed. They learned what they did not know. Perhaps that is not weakness. Perhaps that is a different kind of strength. Scorchwing laughed. A harsh sound that drew attention from other students passing in the hallway. Listen to her. Defending the fragile humans. Tell me, little Ember, will your human friend teach you how to pass the trial of flames? Will he hold your claw when you are too scared to jump? Heat rushed to Ember's face, but she did not look away. He is teaching me that being afraid and being brave can exist together. Something you might understand if you were honest about your own fears. The words surprised even Ember. She had never spoken to Scorchwing this way before. Scorchwing's scales flared with anger. I fear nothing. Unlike you, I am a true dragon. Then why do you care so much about what I learn or who I learn from? Ember asked. Why does my choice bother you? Scorchwing had no answer. He snorted smoke and stalked away, his friends following. But as they left, Ember noticed several other young dragons watching. A small green dragon named Moss approached hesitantly. "Is it true?" Moss asked quietly. "The human ambassador is teaching you about bravery?" Ember nodded, still shaking slightly from the confrontation. Could he teach others? Moss glanced around nervously. "I struggle with the combat training. Everyone says I am too gentle for a dragon." But maybe, before Ember could answer, two more students approached with similar questions. By the time she left the academy that afternoon, 5 young dragons had asked about Marcus's teaching methods. That evening, Marcus met Ember at their usual spot by the fountain. She told him about speaking in class, about confronting Scorchwing, about the students who had approached her. "You did something remarkable today," Marcus said. "You stood up for yourself, and for what you believe in. That took real courage. But I was terrified the entire time," Ember admitted. "Of course you were," Marcus smiled. "That is what made it brave. Now, ready for tomorrow's lesson?" He led her to the Academy's library, to a section dedicated to human history. For hours, they explored records of human achievement. Ember watched footage of the first human spaceflight, of scientists who spent decades solving impossible problems, of artists who created beauty despite living in difficult times. But what struck Ember most were the stories of ordinary humans doing extraordinary things. A teacher who walked miles through dangerous territory to bring books to children. A doctor who worked through exhaustion to save lives during a disaster. A farmer who shared food during famine despite having little. "They are not warriors," Ember observed. "Not the strongest, or the fiercest." "No," Marcus agreed. "But they changed their world anyway. They found their own ways to be brave, to make a difference. That is what I want you to understand. Ember, bravery comes in many forms." He pulled up images of human space stations, of ships designed for long voyages, of equipment built for exploration. "We had no wings, so we built ships. We had no natural armor, so we created suits and shields. We had no fire breath, so we invented engines. Our weakness became our motivation to innovate." Ember studied the images carefully. "You turned your limitations into advantages. We worked with what we had," Marcus said. "Just like you can work with what you have. Your smaller size makes you more agile. Your precise flames allow for delicate work. Your gentle nature helps you understand others. These are not weaknesses, Ember, they are simply different strengths." Over the following days, Ember practiced her own style. Instead of trying to match the powerful, aggressive flight of larger dragons, she focused on agility and precision. Her small flames could not melt stone, but they could perform intricate thermal work that larger dragons struggled with. Other students began to notice. A few asked questions. Some practiced alongside her during free periods, but the trial of flames still loomed ahead, now only 3 days away. On the evening of the 3rd day, Marcus found Ember at the edge of a practice cliff. She stood frozen at the precipice, wings half spread, unable to make herself jump. "I cannot do this," she whispered as tears streamed down her scales. "I have practiced small braveries. I have spoken up. I have stood my ground. But this is too much. I am not ready. I am not brave enough." The wind howled around them as darkness fell. The vast drops stretched below, disappearing into shadows. Marcus stood beside her quietly, looking down at the impossible distance. Marcus sat down on the cliff edge beside Ember, letting his legs dangle over the vast empty space. The young dragon noticed his hands gripping the stone tightly, his discomfort with the height clear despite his calm expression. "You are afraid too," Ember said softly. "Always," Marcus admitted. "But I am here anyway. That is the choice we make, Ember. Not to be without fear, but to decide that something matters more than our fear." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone. It was gray and ordinary, worn by water and time. "This is from Earth. From a river near where I grew up. Humans have a tradition of carrying stones from home when we travel far away." He placed the stone in Ember's claw. It felt warm from being in Marcus's pocket, solid and real. "Keep this," Marcus said. "When you stand at the sky cliffs tomorrow, remember you are not alone. You carry a piece of Earth with you. You carry everything you have learned. You carry all the small braveries you have already accomplished." Ember closed her claw around the stone. "What if I freeze again? What if I cannot make myself jump? Then you try again," Marcus said simply. "Failure is not falling. Failure is never attempting. And Ember, you have already been brave 100 times to reach this moment. Tomorrow is just one more step." They sat together as stars emerged in the darkening sky, neither speaking, both understanding that some fears could not be talked away. They could only be faced. The morning of the Trial of Flames arrived with clear skies. Dragons from across Pyraxis gathered at the ceremonial grounds near the sky cliffs. Families arranged themselves on viewing platforms while judges took their positions. The ancient trial master, a dragon so old his scales had turned silver, presided over the ceremony with dignified silence. Young dragons waited in a line, some excited, others nervous. Ember stood toward the end, her copper scales seeming even paler against the bright colors around her. She clutched the earth stone tightly, hidden in her claw. Marcus stood among the human delegation in the observation area. He caught Ember's eye across the distance and gave her a small nod of encouragement. Scorchwing went first, as was his right as the largest and strongest of their group. He approached the cliff with absolute confidence, his crimson scales gleaming. Without hesitation, he leaped into the void. His dive was perfect. He plummeted straight down, building speed, then spread his wings at the last moment. A massive column of fire erupted from his jaws. So hot, it turned the sand below into glass. He landed with a theatrical flourish, roaring his triumph. The crowd erupted in approval. Scorchwing's family cheered loudly. The judges marked their tablets with satisfied expressions. One by one, other young dragons took their turns. Each dove, with varying degrees of skill and power. Some wobbled during their descent. Others produced smaller flames, but all completed the basic requirements of the trial. Then Ember's name was called. Her legs felt frozen as she approached the cliff edge. The 1,000-meter drop stretched below her, seeming even more impossible than in her nightmares. Wind rushed up from the chasm, carrying the scent of scorched earth. The crowd murmured as they noticed her hesitation. She heard whispers comparing her to the confident dives that had come before. Scorchwing smirked from where he stood with the other successful dragons. Ember's family watched with worried expressions. Her mother's claws gripped the railing of their viewing platform. Marcus watched silently, his face calm but his eyes intense with hope. Ember looked down at the stone in her claw, then out at the assembled dragons. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, to flee, to give up. The fear felt like physical weight pressing down on her wings. Then she remembered Marcus climbing the observation tower despite his trembling hands. She remembered the human firefighters running toward danger. She remembered all the small braveries she had practiced, every time she had chosen to act despite her fear. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. "I am afraid." Shocked silence rippled through the crowd. No dragon had ever admitted fear before a trial. It violated every tradition of displaying fearless strength. "I am terrified," Ember continued, tears beginning to stream down her face. "My wings shake. My heart races. Every part of me wants to run from this cliff." The trial master's ancient eyes widened with surprise. "But I have learned something," Ember said, her voice growing stronger. "Being afraid does not mean being weak. It means being honest. And choosing to jump anyway. That is what bravery truly means." She turned to face the void. The wind caught her wings. The stone felt solid and real in her claw. "For everyone who has ever been afraid," she whispered to herself. "For Marcus, who climbs his tower every morning. For all the small, gentle creatures who find their own courage." Ember leaped. The fall was exactly as terrifying as she had imagined. Wind screamed past her ears. The ground rushed upward at impossible speed. For a moment, panic seized her completely, but then she remembered. She did not have to dive like Scorchwing. She did not have to be what others expected. She spread her wings and turned the dive into a spiral. Her smaller size let her control the spin precisely. Around and around she went, using the techniques she had practiced, working with the wind instead of fighting it. Her flames emerged, not in one massive blast, but in careful, controlled bursts. They created patterns in the air, spiraling trails of fire that painted the sky with light. It was different from the powerful columns other dragons created. It was gentler, more intricate, beautiful, in an entirely new way. The spiral brought her down in a controlled descent. At the last moment, she spread her wings fully and landed softly on the scorched ground. The crowd remained absolutely silent. Ember stood on trembling legs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She had done it. She had faced the fear and jumped anyway, but as the silence stretched, doubt crept in. Had her unconventional approach dishonored the sacred tradition? Had her admission of fear disgraced her family? The ancient trial master rose slowly from his seat. His massive form cast shadows across the ceremonial grounds as he approached. His expression revealed nothing. Ember's wings drooped as exhaustion and uncertainty overwhelmed her. She had been brave. She had jumped. But would it be enough? The trial master's footsteps echoed across the ceremonial grounds as he approached Ember. Every dragon held their breath, waiting for his judgment. The ancient silver dragon had presided over the trial of flames for generations. His word carried the weight of tradition and law. Ember stood as tall as her trembling legs would allow. She had spoken her truth. She had faced her fear. Whatever came next, she would accept it. The trial master stopped before her, his enormous form towering above. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered his massive head in a gesture of respect rarely given to younglings. The crowd gasped. "Young Ember," the trial master's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "In my many years, I have witnessed thousands complete the trial of flames. I have seen powerful dives and spectacular displays of fire. But today, you have shown us something we had forgotten." He lifted his head and addressed the entire assembly. "She reminded us that courage takes many forms, that the hardest bravery is not pretending to be fearless, but choosing to act despite fear. That speaking truth requires more strength than hiding behind false confidence." The trial master turned back to Ember. "You honored the spirit of this trial more deeply than those who simply followed its form. You pass, young dragon. You pass with distinction." Ember's legs nearly gave out with relief. Tears flowed freely down her scales. But now they were tears of joy and release. Her family rushed down from the viewing platform. Her mother wrapped wings around her, trembling with pride and relief. Her father nuzzled her gently, his eyes shining. From across the grounds, Marcus smiled, his own eyes wet. He placed his hand over his heart in a human gesture of respect. But the impact of Ember's dive rippled far beyond that moment. In the days following the trial, young dragons began approaching Ember with questions. A shy blue dragon named River admitted struggling with combat training. A gentle brown dragon named Clay confessed fear of disappointing his warrior family. One by one, students who had hidden their struggles found courage to speak openly. Even more surprising was what happened during the next council meeting. Elder dragons debated the Trial of Flames tradition, some arguing it should adapt to recognize different expressions of courage. The conversation grew heated, but it was happening. Change, slow and uncertain, had begun. One afternoon, Ember found Scorchwing waiting by the fountain where she often met Marcus. She tensed, expecting mockery or challenge. Instead, Scorchwing looked uncomfortable, his usual arrogance absent. "Your dive," he said gruffly. "When you spoke about being afraid, that took. I could not have done that." Ember tilted her head, surprised. "Everyone expects me to be fearless because I am large and strong," Scorchwing continued, the words clearly difficult for him. But I have fears too. I am terrified of disappointing my family. Every night before the trial, I could not sleep, worrying I would fail. You seemed so confident, Ember said softly. That was pretending, Scorchwing admitted. Watching you be honest about fear. That made me realize how much energy I waste pretending. It must be exhausting for you too. So, it was, Ember agreed. But it is easier now. Scorchwing nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He lowered his head slightly, a gesture of apology. I was wrong to mock your learning. Your human teacher understands things we dragons have forgotten. After Scorchwing left, Marcus appeared, having witnessed the exchange from a distance. That was significant, he observed. He apologized, Ember said, still processing the encounter. Scorchwing actually apologized. Honesty invites honesty, Marcus said. Your courage gave him permission to acknowledge his own struggles. That is leadership, Ember. The day of Marcus's departure arrived too quickly. His cultural exchange assignment had ended, and he needed to return to Earth. The entire academy gathered to bid farewell to the human delegation. Ember approached Marcus privately before the ceremony. She carried something precious, wrapped carefully in silk. This is for you, she said, unwrapping a single copper scale. It gleamed softly in the light. Dragons rarely give away their scales. They are part of us, our protection, our identity. But I want you to have this. Marcus accepted it with reverent care. Ember, I cannot express what this means. You gave me something more valuable, Ember said, her voice thick with emotion. You did not teach me to be brave. You taught me that I already was. You helped me see that my differences were not weaknesses waiting to be fixed, but strengths waiting to be recognized. You did the hardest work yourself, Marcus replied. I simply showed you what was already there. How do humans say goodbye? Ember asked. We say, until we meet again. Marcus smiled. Because important connections do not truly end. During the formal farewell ceremony, the Dragon Academy presented Marcus with honors for his contributions to their understanding of courage and teaching methods. But the greatest tribute came when 12 young dragons, including Ember, demonstrated a new program they had developed. They called it Small Braveries. 3 months passed. Marcus sat in his office on Earth, reviewing reports from various diplomatic assignments. A notification appeared on his communication terminal. Incoming holographic message from Pyraxis. He activated it, and Ember's image materialized before him. She looked different now. More confident, her posture straighter. But her gentle nature still shone through her eyes. Ambassador Marcus, she began, her voice warm. I wanted to share what has happened since you left. The image shifted to show the Dragon Academy. Young dragons of all sizes and colors practiced together. Some worked on traditional combat skills. Others focused on precision work, artistic expression, or scholarly pursuits. Teachers encouraged each student's individual strengths, rather than forcing everyone into the same mold. The Small Braveries program has grown, Ember explained. We help students who struggle with traditional methods discover their own paths to courage. 23 younglings have joined. Several have already completed modified trials that honor their unique abilities. The image showed Ember working with a tiny green dragon who was terrified of heights. Step by step, with patience and encouragement, Ember guided the student through the same process Marcus had used with her. I assist at the academy now, Ember continued. Teaching others what you taught me. That bravery is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. That being different is not being lesser. That admitting struggle takes more courage than pretending strength. She paused, emotion filling her voice. You changed my life, Marcus. You helped me see the dragon I could become. Now, I help others see the same in themselves. The message showed one final image. The young dragons had created a memorial garden near the fountain where Ember and Marcus used to meet. At its center stood a simple stone monument. Carved into it were words in both dragon script and human language. Bravery comes in many forms. Courage begins with honesty. We are all stronger than our fears. Ember's image returned. Thank you, Marcus Chen, for seeing me when I could not see myself. For teaching me that the smallest dragon can have the bravest heart. For showing me that admitting fear is itself an act of tremendous courage. She touched her chest where the earthstone hung on a chain around her neck. Until we meet again. My friend, the message ended. Marcus sat quietly for a moment, then picked up the copper scale Ember had given him. He kept it on his desk always, a reminder that sometimes the greatest impact comes not from grand gestures, but from helping one individual discover their own light. Outside his window, stars gleamed in the darkness. Somewhere among them, a small copper dragon with a lifted spirit was changing her world, one small bravery at a time. And that, Marcus thought, was the truest measure of courage.